I am Sergeant Alyssa Holder, 27 years old, United States Army. I was trained to face the enemy and to follow orders without question. But no amount of training could have prepared me for that night at 0300 hours when I was lying on the cold oak floor, blood seeping from the corner of my mouth, begging my mother, Vera, to make my stepfather stop. She didn't. She just watched. After he walked away, she stepped over to me, looked down, and her voice was colder than any bayonet. If you had just signed the damn mortgage papers, none of this would have happened. But that night wasn't the beginning. It was the breaking point. The truth is, my mother had been erasing me long before the bruises appeared. They thought they had broken me. But they made one fatal mistake. They turned their soldier into the enemy. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe if you've ever been treated like something to be scraped off the bottom of a shoe by your own family. My training kicked in before conscious thought. Control your breathing, assess the damage. I took a slow, shallow breath, tasting the coppery tang of blood on my tongue. The throbbing in my shoulder radiated down my arm, a dull, insistent fire. From the corner of the living room, the television blared, the canned enthusiasm of sports commentators covering a late-night game. I could hear the sharp hiss of a Bud Light can being opened, followed by a satisfied sigh from Dexter. He hadn't even bothered to leave the room. He was a victor surveying his conquest from the comfort of his recliner. But it was Vera's actions that truly broke me. She didn't rush to my side. She didn't call for help. She walked into the kitchen with a calm, deliberate pace, her footsteps measured on the hardwood floor. She returned not with a first aid kit, but with a roll of paper towels and a yellow bottle of Pine Sol. She knelt, not beside me, but a few feet away, where a few droplets of my blood had splattered on the polished oak. The sharp, artificial scent of lemon cleaner filled the air, a grotesque perfume for the violence that had just occurred. She began to wipe the floor, her movements methodical, efficient. As she scrubbed, she muttered just loud enough for me to hear over the drone of the TV. Always something, always a mess to clean up after her, never thinks about anyone else. The words hit me harder than Dexter's fist. He had assaulted my body, but she was annihilating my existence. I wasn't her daughter, lying injured on the floor. I was a stain, a nuisance, a mess that needed to be tidied up before it set and became a permanent problem. My pain was an inconvenience to her housekeeping. The wail of a siren in the distance was the only reason she stopped. Mrs. Gable from next door must have heard the crash. Vera's body language shifted instantly. The cold efficiency melted away, replaced by a frantic, theatrical panic. She rushed to the door just as the EMTs arrived. "Oh, thank God you're here," she cried, her voice thick with manufactured tears. "My daughter, she's so clumsy. She fell coming down the stairs for a glass of water." 2 paramedics came in, their faces a mixture of professional calm and cautious assessment. One of them, a man with tired eyes, looked from the staircase to where I was lying, a clear 15 feet away. His gaze lingered on me, a question mark forming in his expression. Vera intercepted his doubt with the skill of a seasoned general. She rushed to my side, stroking my hair with a hand that felt like ice. "She's always been this way, haven't you, sweetie?" she cooed, her voice dripping with syrupy concern. But her eyes, the ones only I could see, were cold, hard, and sharp as shattered glass. They weren't asking a question, they were giving an order. Be silent. And I was. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing the air from my lungs. My silence, born of shock and intimidation, became my consent. In the eyes of these strangers, I was now just a clumsy girl, and my mother was a worried parent. The narrative was set. The lie was cemented. The emergency room was a chaotic symphony of beeping machines, hurried conversations, and the sterile smell of antiseptic. I sat on the edge of a gurney while a nurse gently cleaned the cut on my lip. Vera wasn't hovering with concern. She was sitting in the visitor's chair, legs crossed, scrolling idly through Facebook on her phone, completely detached. Suddenly, she let out a loud, delighted gasp that turned heads. "Oh my goodness, look at this!" she exclaimed, her voice cutting through the ER's low hum. She stood up and walked over, shoving her phone into my face. On the screen was a beaming couple, the woman flaunting a massive diamond ring. "That's the Miller girl, you know, from down the street. She just got engaged in Paris. Can you believe the size of that ring?" Vera said, her tone as casual as if we were discussing the weather over coffee. The nurse paused, her hand hovering mid-air. She looked from the garish photo to my swollen face, then to Vera. In that moment, I wasn't a patient in need of care. I wasn't her daughter suffering from an assault. I was a benchmark for failure. While other daughters were getting engaged in Paris with diamond rings, I was getting stitches in a Fayetteville ER. The comparison was the point. The public humiliation was the mission. Just then, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, and her entire demeanor softened, a genuine warmth flooding her face that I hadn't seen directed at me in years. It was my brother, Nico. She turned her back to me slightly, creating a private bubble for her golden child. Her voice dropped into a sweet, melodic tone. "Hey, honey." "No, everything's fine," she chirped. I could hear the muffled sounds of his questions. "Oh, your sister? She's just a little under the weather, that's all. Nothing to worry about. You just focus on your work, okay? Mom is so proud of you." She listened for another moment, then laughed, a light, carefree sound that made my stomach churn. "I love you too, sweetie. Talk soon." She hung up and slid the phone back into her purse. She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. The message had been delivered with brutal clarity. In Vera's world, Nico was the star, the source of pride, the story worth telling. I was the subplot, the footnote, the inconvenience to be hidden and managed. I wasn't just invisible, I was a liability to the perfect family portrait she was so desperate to paint. As the nurse started to apply the butterfly bandage to my lip, I looked at my reflection in the dark screen of a heart monitor nearby. I saw a soldier, trained and disciplined. But in the story my mother told the world, and even herself, I didn't exist. She was erasing me, wiping the stain. And I realized, with a chilling certainty that went deeper than any bruise, this wasn't the first time she had tried to clean me up. In the sterile quiet of my apartment, away from the ER, the adrenaline finally ebbed, leaving behind a cold, hard clarity. My training as a non-commissioned officer had taught me one critical lesson. After every major engagement, you compile an after-action report. You document the facts, analyze the enemy's tactics, and identify your own vulnerabilities. You don't let emotion cloud the data. You create a record. Vera's campaign to erase me wasn't a single battle. It was a long, systematic war of attrition. And as I sat at my small kitchen table, the throbbing in my shoulder a dull metronome, I began to compile my report. I wasn't just a daughter anymore, I was an investigator. And my own life was the cold case file. I opened the archives of my memory and began to log the evidence. Exhibit A, the memento box. Crime, memory erasure. Year, 2010. I was 15. My father, the man whose face I barely remembered, was a Vietnam veteran. My only tangible connection to him was a beat-up Nike shoebox I kept hidden in the back of my closet. It held his dog tags, a few faded photos of him in uniform, his tarnished sharpshooter badge, and a wristwatch with a cracked face, its hands frozen at 4:17. It wasn't much, but it was my entire inheritance of him. One Tuesday afternoon, I came home from school to find Vera in the middle of a spring cleaning frenzy. The box was gone. When I asked her, my voice trembling, she didn't even look up from scrubbing the baseboards. "Oh, that old thing? I tossed it. It was just dusty junk, Alyssa. You need to live in the present, not cling to the past." Her tone was so casual, so reasonable. But later that night, driven by a sick feeling, I crept out to the trash cans by the side of the house. Buried beneath coffee grounds and junk mail, I found the proof of her true intent. The photos of my father, torn into small, unrecognizable squares. She hadn't just thrown away objects. She had executed a memory. She was systematically deleting him from my life. Exhibit B, the prom dress. Crime, sabotage of a milestone. Year, 2013, senior prom. For most girls at my high school, it was a fairy tale. For me, it was a goal I had worked for. I spent 6 months bussing tables and washing dishes at a Denny's off the I-95, saving every dollar. The dress I bought wasn't extravagant, but it was mine. A simple, elegant navy blue gown that made me feel, for the first time, beautiful. The night of the prom, I was doing my makeup when Vera came into my room, holding a glass of Merlot. She was beaming, telling me how proud she was. "Let me just get a look at you, sweetie," she said, stepping closer. And then it happened. A theatrical stumble, a feigned gasp, and the dark red wine cascaded down the front of my dress. Her apologies were a performance worthy of an Oscar. "Oh my God, I am so sorry. I'm just so clumsy." But for a split second, before the mask of regret settled, I saw it. A flicker of triumphant satisfaction in her eyes. I ended up going to my senior prom in one of her old, frumpy dresses from the 90s. The next day, she posted a photo of me on Facebook. The caption read, "My Alyssa is so down to earth, she doesn't care for all that glitz and glam." She hadn't just ruined my night, she had twisted it into a self-serving narrative about her humble daughter, erasing my hard work and my one moment to shine. Exhibit C. The College Fund. Crime, grand larceny of a future. Year, 2014. My father had left a small UTMA account in my name, a trust fund meant for my college education. It wasn't a fortune, just a few $1,000s. But it was my ticket out, my chance to attend Fayetteville Community College and build a life. The day I turned 18, I went to her, paperwork in hand, ready to start my future. Vera informed me, with the same casual tone she used when discussing the weather, that the money was gone. "We had to get the roof repaired, Alyssa," she said, feigning a sigh of shared hardship. "This is your house too. It's only fair that you contribute." My heart sank, but the truth was far uglier. A few months later, I overheard an argument between her and a debt collector on the phone. The roof was never repaired. My college fund, my future, had been used to pay off Dexter's gambling debts. She stole my inheritance from one veteran to subsidize the addictions of another. A few years later, she sold my dad's old '87 Ford F-150, the last big thing of his we had, for scrap metal. She used the money to buy Dexter a new set of Callaway golf clubs for Father's Day. Exhibit D. The Character Assassination. Crime, preemptive sabotage. Year, 2015. When I decided to enlist, I knew I had found my path. The Army was a world of structure, merit, and honor. Everything my home life was not. For my application, I needed a letter of recommendation. I asked Pastor John from our local Methodist church, a man I respected. He wrote me a glowing letter, and I was accepted. It wasn't until years later, when I ran into his wife at the grocery store, that I learned the truth. Vera had secretly met with Pastor John before he wrote the letter. She had cried in his office, telling him she was deeply concerned about my emotional instability and my volatile temper. She suggested that the military would be a good place for me, a disciplined environment to keep me in line. She didn't try to stop me from enlisting. She was smarter than that. She poisoned the well. She planted the seed of doubt in the mind of a respected community leader, framing my escape as proof of my instability. Before I even put on the uniform, she had written my story for the world. I wasn't a patriot. I was a problem child in need of fixing. Laying out the facts, one after another, felt like stacking bricks. Each memory was a solid, heavy weight, and together they built an inescapable prison wall of truth. She hadn't just been cruel in moments of anger. It was a strategy. A long-term, calculated campaign to undermine, devalue, and control every aspect of my life. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What is that one memory, that one special thing, that someone in your life tried to tarnish or take away from you? If this resonates with you, hit the like button. And if you feel brave enough, comment with one word that describes that stolen memory. Let's reclaim them together. I looked down at my mental dossier. The evidence was overwhelming, the pattern of behavior undeniable. My report was complete. But an after-action report is useless if it just sits in a file. Its purpose is to inform the next mission, and I knew, with absolute certainty, what my next mission was. A case this strong couldn't be won by a single soldier. I had the facts, I had the evidence. But I was missing one crucial element. I needed a witness. I needed my battle buddy. I had to find Jules. My after-action report was complete, a cold, hard indictment filed away in my mind. But a report is just paper. To win a war, you need boots on the ground. You need an ally. You need your battle buddy. Finding Jules Moreno, wasn't easy. Vera had been ruthlessly effective at isolating me over the years, severing friendships with carefully planted lies and manufactured drama. Jewel and I had been inseparable during basic training at Fort Jackson, two terrified recruits who found strength in each other. But after we were assigned to different units, Vera had gone to work, whispering poison into Jules's ear until our calls became strained, then infrequent, then stopped altogether. But Vera underestimated the digital footprint of a U.S. Army veteran. My search was methodical, a reconnaissance mission conducted from my laptop. I scoured Facebook, diving into veterans groups. Fort Jackson Basic Training Alumni. 3rd Battalion, 34th Infantry Regiment. Victory starts here. I scrolled through thousands of faces, years of posts, a digital sea of uniforms and memories. For 2 days, I found nothing. The familiar despair began to creep in, the cold voice that sounded just like my mother's, telling me I was alone. Then, I found her. A comment on a shared photo of our old drill sergeant. Her name was different now, Juliana Wallace. And her profile picture showed a smiling woman in blue scrubs, an RN badge pinned to her chest. Her location was listed as Asheville, a 2-hour drive from Fayetteville. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, a dozen different messages running through my head. In the end, I kept it simple. I sent her a direct message using the language we both understood. Jules, it's Alyssa Holder, requesting fire support. Her reply came in under 5 minutes, so coordinates? We agreed to meet halfway, at a Waffle House off the highway at 2300 hours. There's an anonymity to a Waffle House at night. It's a brightly lit sanctuary for the tired, the lonely, the hungry. No one judges you there. It was the perfect, neutral ground. I was the first to arrive, my clumsy entrance announced by the tap-tap-tap of my crutch on the linoleum floor. I slid into a booth, the sticky vinyl clinging to my jeans. A few minutes later, the bell above the door chimed, and there she was. She looked different, older, more confident. But her eyes were the same, sharp and intelligent. She saw me, and her face broke into a wide grin that immediately faltered when she saw the crutch and the dark bruise blooming on my cheek. She strode over to the booth, and without a single word, she pulled me into a fierce, protective hug. It wasn't a delicate, polite hug. It was an embrace that said, I am here. I've got you. For the first time since that night, I felt the rigid wall I'd built inside myself begin to crack. I let myself sink into it, just for a second, and it felt like coming home. She slid into the booth opposite me and tossed a small plastic bag onto the table. A bag of Haribo gold bears, our shared currency of survival from those grueling nights at Fort Jackson. A lump formed in my throat. She remembered. All right, Sergeant, she said, her voice soft but firm. Talk to me. What's the situation on the ground? And so, I did. Over the sounds of sizzling bacon and the clatter of plates, fueled by burnt coffee and the shared bag of gummy bears, I gave her my report. It wasn't the cold, analytical briefing I'd recited to myself. The words came out tired, raw, and heavy with years of unshed tears. I told her everything. The assault, the hospital, Vera's chilling performance. I told her about the prom dress, the college fund, the box of my father's memories. I laid out the entire archive of malice on that sticky tabletop. Jules just listened. She didn't interrupt, didn't look shocked, didn't offer platitudes. She just watched my face, her own expression hardening into a cold fury that was entirely on my behalf. That, right there, was the greatest gift anyone had ever given me. She believed me. Unconditionally. When I got to the part about Vera manipulating Pastor John, Jules's hand slapped the table, making the salt shaker jump. I knew it, she whispered, her eyes flashing. I knew something was wrong. I looked at her, confused. What do you mean? Alyssa, after we got to our duty stations, your mom called me, twice. She told me you were having a hard time adjusting, that you were struggling with some issues and needed space. She said it in the most concerned, loving mother voice you could ever imagine. She made me feel like I'd be hurting you if I kept calling. Jules shook her head, disgust twisting her features. That woman. She's a professional. Hearing that was like a key turning in a lock I didn't even know was there. Years of self-doubt, of wondering if I was the problem, if I was crazy, evaporated in the greasy air of that Waffle House. The gaslighting lost its power. I wasn't unstable, I was being systematically isolated. What I remembered was real. We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the scraping of a spatula on the grill. The waitress came and refilled our coffee mugs. After she left, Jules leaned forward, her hands covering mine. Listen to me, Sergeant Holder, she said, her voice low and intense, locking my gaze. We have a creed. We don't leave our own behind. You are not fighting this battle alone anymore. Do you understand me? Anytime, anywhere. You call, and I will be there. I've got your six. It was a promise, sealed with the unbreakable bond of a battle buddy. A bond stronger than any blood tie Vera could ever claim. Driving back to Fayetteville on the dark highway, the world felt different. The crushing weight of loneliness had been lifted. The battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for the first time, I had someone in my corner. I had reinforcements. As I pulled into my apartment complex, my phone buzzed with a text from Jules. Hey, thinking about what you said. You remember Ms. Thomason from JROTC, the badass Marine captain who taught us land nav? Wonder what she'd have to say about all this. Jules's text message pinged in the quiet of my car, the screen a small bright beacon in the dark. Ms. Thomason. The name echoed from a part of my past I hadn't accessed in years. Captain Thomason, USMC, retired. Our JROTC instructor. A woman who carried herself with an unwavering authority that demanded respect. She was tough, fair, and had a gaze that could see right through a flimsy excuse. I remembered the awe I felt for her, a woman who had shattered every glass ceiling and never apologized for it. The next morning, fueled by a fresh surge of purpose, I sat at my laptop. Finding her was easier than finding Jules. A woman like Captain Thomason leaves a legacy. A quick search brought up her name, listed as retired faculty from our high school. I found an old email address and a phone number. For an hour, I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the mouse. What would I even say? Hi, remember me? I need you to help me prove my mother is a monster. It sounded insane. Before I could build up the nerve to call, a notification popped up in the corner of my screen. An email. The sender's name made my breath catch in my throat. Eleanor Thomason. The subject line was 3 simple, chilling words. We need to talk. We met at the Coffee Scene, a small, quiet cafe in downtown Fayetteville with worn-out armchairs and the rich smell of roasting beans. She was sitting at a table in the back corner, away from the windows. Retirement had softened some of her sharp edges. There were more lines around her eyes, her posture was a little less rigid, but the eyes themselves were the same, as sharp and perceptive as I remembered, like a hawk's. Holder, she said, her voice a low gravel. It wasn't a question. She motioned to the chair opposite her. Thank you for coming. Ma'am, I replied, my voice coming out steadier than I expected. Years of training kicked in. She didn't waste time on small talk. Marines don't. She slid a thin manila folder across the table. It landed with a soft, definitive sound. I was wrong, Holder, she said, her gaze unwavering. I was wrong, and I've lived with it for a long time. My heart started to pound against my ribs. I said nothing, just looked at the folder. Years ago, she continued, right after you enlisted, your mother came to see me. She showed up at the school, no appointment. She sat in my office, in the very chair you're sitting in now, and she cried. Thomason paused, her lip curling in a faint, bitter line. She was very, very convincing. She told me she was worried about you. She said you had emotional issues. that you were prone to erratic moods. She was afraid the military would be too harsh, that it might break you. Every word was a confirmation, another brick falling into place. Thomason pushed the folder a little closer to me. She followed up with an email. My hand trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside were 3 pages of printed emails. My eyes scanned the text, catching phrases that leapt off the page like enemy fire. Desperate to protect her from herself. Her temper is so volatile, we just don't know what to do. Hoping the structure will finally give her some stability. I'm just a mother, trying to do what's best for her troubled daughter. It was my character assassination, documented in black and white. A premeditated strike against my credibility, executed with the precision of a sniper. I felt a wave of cold nausea. All this time, the narrative Vera had built around me, the broken, unstable girl, had been working its poison in places I never could have imagined. "I'll be honest with you, Holder," Thomason said, pulling me from my daze. Even then, something felt off. I knew you. You were one of the best cadets I ever had. Focused, disciplined, a natural leader. What she was describing didn't line up with the soldier I saw in my classroom every day. But her performance, the tears, the worry, it was flawless. She looked down at her hands, folded on the table. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something other than strength in her eyes. It was regret. "A soldier's conscience has been eating at me for years," she said, her voice quiet but heavy. "My job was to prepare you for the challenges ahead, to mentor you. And I let an outsider, your own mother, plant a seed of doubt. I didn't question it hard enough. I didn't protect my cadet. For that, I am sorry." The word sorry, coming from this woman, landed with the force of a physical blow. It was the one thing I had never heard, the one thing I had stopped hoping for. And it wasn't from the person who owed it to me, but from someone who had been just a pawn in Vera's game. The apology undid me. A tear I didn't know was there slid down my cheek. It wasn't just vindication. It was a confirmation that I hadn't been alone in seeing the lie, even if no one had said it out loud. I was the victim of a master manipulator. I wiped the tear away with the back of my hand, my military composure returning. "Thank you, ma'am," I said. She nodded, her expression grim. "I'm prepared to testify to all of this, if it comes to that, to provide these emails as evidence. This isn't about your personal family drama anymore, Holder. This is about the truth. She lied to manipulate a situation involving a future member of the armed forces. That's an integrity violation I can no longer ignore." She pushed the folder the rest of the way across the table. "Take it. Use it." I picked it up. The few sheets of paper felt impossibly heavy in my hands. This was different from the memories I had archived. This wasn't just my word against hers anymore. This was tangible. This was proof. This was a weapon. As I stood up to leave, I looked at the retired Marine captain who had just handed me my first real piece of ammunition. "Why now, ma'am?" I asked. "Jules Wallace called me last night," she said simply. "A good soldier never leaves a comrade behind." Walking out of the coffee shop and into the bright North Carolina sun, the world felt sharp and clear. The mission had changed. My after-action report was no longer just a record of past injustices, it was the foundation for a new operational plan. This was no longer a defensive war. It was time to plan a counteroffensive. After a few days of recovery under Jules's watchful eye, returning to my own apartment felt like re-entering a compromised AO, an area of operations. My training had ingrained in me a hyper-awareness of my surroundings. You learn to spot the things that are out of place, the subtle shifts in the environment that signal danger. And as I stood in the doorway of my own living room, every nerve ending I had was screaming that the perimeter had been breached. It was nothing I could immediately put my finger on. A book on the shelf seemed slightly askew. A coaster on the coffee table was a quarter-inch from its usual spot. To anyone else, it would be nothing. To a soldier, it was a tripwire. I didn't panic. I did what I was trained to do. I began a systematic sweep of the room, my eyes scanning every surface, every corner. My gaze landed on the bookshelf. On a Christmas gift from Vera from 2 years prior, a porcelain doll with vacant blue eyes and rosy cheeks. It was the kind of frilly, old-fashioned thing I hated, but I'd kept it to avoid a fight. Now, I saw it for the first time. In the center of the doll's left eye, almost invisible against the blue, was a tiny, perfect black dot. The lens of a camera. A cold, professional calm washed over me. The emotional response could wait. Right now, there was a hostile surveillance device in my private quarters, and it needed to be neutralized. I retrieved my small electronics toolkit, the one I used for minor repairs on base. With the precision of a surgeon, I dismantled the doll's head, located the micro camera wired to a battery pack, and disabled it. I placed the components into a Ziploc bag, labeled it with the date and time, and sealed it. Evidence. Only then did I pick up my phone and call her. Vera answered on the second ring, her voice sickeningly cheerful. "Alyssa, honey, I was just thinking about you." "You put a camera in my apartment," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. There was a brief pause, not of shock, but of calculation. "Oh, that?" she said, her tone shifting to one of martyred concern. "I was just so worried about you, sweetie. After your fall, I just wanted to make sure you were okay." The audacity of it, the seamless twist of a gross violation into an act of maternal love, was breathtaking. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just said, "Don't ever contact me again," and hung up. A few days later, Jules came over. She was carrying a dusty, forgotten-looking cardboard box. "A guy my dad served with in Nam called him," she explained, setting the box on my table. "He was cleaning out his attic and found this. It belonged to your father, James. He'd asked his buddy to hold onto it for him right before he got really sick." My father? The man Vera had painted as the one who abandoned me. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't a box of mementos. It was a ghost. Inside, nestled in yellowed tissue paper, wasn't a uniform or medals. It was an old Motorola Razr flip phone and a thick stack of computer paper held together by a brittle rubber band. The top page was a computer-printed log of text messages. Jules gave my shoulder a squeeze. "I'll be in the kitchen if you need me," she said softly, and left me alone with it. I sank to the floor, my back against the couch, and began to read. The messages were from my father, James, to me, sent during the last few years of his life as the complications from Agent Orange were consuming him. Years when Vera had told me he wanted nothing to do with me. Years where she had controlled the only phone line into our house. The printed words began to swim before my eyes, each one a needle piercing through a lifetime of lies. "Happy 16th birthday, my princess. Hope you know your old man is thinking of you. Be strong. Heard you joined the JROTC. That's my girl, a soldier's daughter. So damn proud. Tried calling again. Vera must be busy. Just wanted to hear your voice, Alyssa. It's been too long. The doctors say the chemo isn't working. I don't have much time. Please, Vera, just let me talk to her. I need her to know. Alyssa, if you ever read this, know that I never stopped trying. I love you. I always have. Don't let anyone tell you different." The world tilted on its axis. The foundational lie of my existence, that my father had left, that he hadn't wanted me, crumbled into dust. He hadn't abandoned me. He had been fighting for me. He had been reaching for me through the bars of a cage Vera had built around my life. She hadn't just blocked his number. She had severed a lifeline. She had stolen a father from his daughter and then made the daughter believe it was her own fault. I didn't cry. The pain was too vast, too profound for tears. It was a geological shift deep inside my soul, a tectonic plate of grief and rage grinding together, creating a pressure that had to go somewhere. It solidified. It cooled. It hardened into a silent, lethal fury. Vera hadn't just abused me. She hadn't just sabotaged my future. She had rewritten my past. She had poisoned my roots. She had taken the pure love of a dying father and twisted it into a weapon to torment me. That was the unforgivable crime. The air in my lungs turned to ice. The muddled confusion, the pain, the self-doubt, it all burned away, leaving behind a single, diamond-hard point of clarity. The mission was no longer about survival. It was no longer about defense. I stood up, my movements precise and deliberate. I walked to my laptop, opened it, and the screen illuminated my face in the dim light. My fingers moved to the keyboard, the clicks echoing in the silent apartment. I typed the words into the Google search bar, each letter a declaration of war. Veteran Affairs Lawyer, Fayetteville, North Carolina. The fury that had solidified in my apartment was a cold, efficient engine. It wasn't the hot, blinding rage of a victim anymore. It was the controlled, channeled energy of a soldier with a clear objective. My Google search had led me to one name: Malcolm Rios, Major, U.S. Army Rangers, retired. His firm's website was no nonsense, and his bio was brief. They called him the Wolf. He was exactly what I needed. We met at a place called Freedom Grounds Coffee, a veteran-owned shop near Fort Bragg. The air inside smelled of dark roast and patriotism. An American flag hung on one wall, a POW MIA flag on another. Unit patches, the 82nd Airborne's AA, the 1st Special Forces Group's crest, were proudly displayed behind the counter. This was my language, my world. Malcolm Rios was in his late 50s, with a calm, weathered face and the kind of sharp, assessing eyes that missed nothing. He didn't offer a handshake. He just nodded toward the chair. "Sergeant Holder," he said. I didn't tell him my story. I didn't cry or plead my case. I placed the manila folder on the table between us. It now contained everything: Captain Thomason's emails, the Ziploc bag with the camera components, printouts of my father's text messages. "Major," I began, my voice steady. "This is a situation brief. The subjects are Vera and Dexter Maddox. My objective: terminate hostile actions, secure my assets, and seek justice for prolonged psychological and physical warfare." He opened the folder. He read every page in a deliberate, unnerving silence, his expression unreadable. He examined the tiny camera in its plastic bag. He read my father's last messages, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. When he was done, he closed the folder and looked me straight in the eye. A long, silent moment passed as he took my measure. "Welcome to the fight, Sergeant," he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "I'll be your artillery support." A wave of relief so profound it almost buckled me washed through my body. I had a commanding officer. As if on cue from the universe, when I returned to my apartment, there was a priority mail envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a fresh set of mortgage refinance documents and a yellow post-it note stuck to the top. Dexter's angry scrawl covering the sticky paper. "Sign it. Don't make me ask again." The old Alyssa would have frozen, her stomach churning with fear. The new Alyssa saw an opportunity. I called Malcolm. After explaining the situation, I asked, "What are my orders, sir?" "The subject is attempting intimidation," he said, his voice calm. "Standard procedure is to demonstrate that the tactic is ineffective and will no longer be tolerated. You know what to do, Sergeant." I did. I took a photo of the documents and the note, emailing them to Malcolm to be logged as evidence. Then I carried the papers out to the small, patchy lawn behind my apartment building, where a rusty burn barrel sat for trash. I stuffed the papers inside, doused them with lighter fluid, and struck a match. The papers curled, blackened, and then burst into a satisfying roar of orange flame. The threat, the demand, the years of coerced obedience, all of it turned to gray ash that floated up into the evening sky. I recorded the entire thing on my phone. Then I sent the video to Dexter. No text, no explanation. Just the silent, flickering image of his power turning into smoke. The psychological warfare began almost immediately. My phone buzzed with an incoming barrage of texts from Vera. "What have you done? You're tearing this family apart." "I don't know what I did to deserve a daughter who treats me like this." "Dexter is just a little hot-headed, Alyssa. You know he loves you." "After everything I've sacrificed for you, this is how you repay me?" I didn't reply. I didn't block her number. Instead, I initiated a new protocol. I printed every single text message. I went to Target and bought a large corkboard, a box of push pins, and a spool of red yarn. Back in my apartment, I mounted the board on my living room wall. It became my war room. Each event, each piece of evidence was pinned to the board. The prom dress incident, the stolen college fund, the email from Captain Thomason, the photo of Dexter's note, and now, Vera's manipulative text. With the red yarn, I began connecting the data points, mapping out the patterns of abuse, the lines of attack, the strategy of my enemy. Transforming her words from emotional weapons into cold, hard data on a board gave me distance. It gave me clarity. It gave me control. Looking at the web of red yarn, I saw one final strategic objective: the weak point in their formation. Nico, my brother, the golden child, insulated from the truth in his perfect world. He was a lawyer. He was smart. But he was operating on faulty intelligence provided by Vera his entire life. It was time for an information drop. I made copies. My original birth certificate with my father, James Holder's, name clearly listed. The printouts of his most heartfelt text messages. I placed them in a clean manila envelope. On a single sheet of paper, I wrote one sentence. "This is the truth Mom hid from us." I sealed the envelope and addressed it not to his home, but to the prestigious law firm where he worked in downtown Raleigh. I didn't ask him for help. I didn't demand he take a side. I simply provided him with the weapon of truth. It was up to him to decide which way to fire it. It's an incredible feeling, isn't it? The moment you stop reacting and start acting. The moment you take their weapons and turn them into your own tools. If you've ever had a moment where you took back your power, hit the like button to stand with me. And in the comments, tell me the one word that describes that feeling for you. Let's call it what it is. Dropping that envelope in the mail felt like launching a precision-guided missile. I had no idea what the blast radius would be, only that I had aimed it at the heart of the enemy's command structure. All I could do was return to my post, maintain operational security, and wait for the aftershocks. They came 2 days later. My phone rang with an unknown number. I answered with a crisp, "Sergeant Holder." "Alyssa? It's Nico." His voice, usually so smooth and confident, the voice of a successful lawyer, was frayed, trembling with a mixture of confusion and a rage I'd never heard from him before. "This envelope, these papers, tell me this is some kind of sick joke." I kept my own voice level, calm. This was the critical moment. "I don't have time for jokes, Nico. What you have in your hands is documented fact. It's the intelligence Vera has been withholding from us our entire lives. She said Dad left. She said he didn't want us." "Look at the evidence, Nico," I said, my tone softening just a fraction. "That's all I'm asking. I just gave you the mission brief. It's up to you what you do with it." He was silent for a long moment, the only sound his ragged breathing. Then the line went dead. He'd hung up. Phase 1 was complete. The missile had hit its target. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from Jules. "Getting a report from my neighborhood watch contact. Major disturbance at the Maddox residence. Lots of shouting." I allowed myself a small, grim smile. The golden child was finally questioning his commander. The chain of command was broken. Vera's panic was immediate and predictable. When direct control fails, a narcissist expands the battlefield. Her next move was an attempt to outflank me by attacking my reputation. She went to the community church we had attended when I was a teenager and put on the performance of a lifetime. I heard about it from an old family friend who called me, her voice dripping with pity. Vera had apparently wept in front of the pastor, telling a harrowing, fabricated story about her poor, brave daughter who had come back from the army with a severe case of PTSD. She claimed I was not myself, that I was turning my back on the family that loved me so dearly, and that she was just a heartbroken mother trying to save her child. It was a brilliant, preemptive strike designed to paint me as an unstable veteran and her as a saintly victim before any real truth could come out. Her next move was even more desperate. 2 days after Nico's call, I received a notification from the front gate at Fort Bragg. A civilian, a Ms. Vera Maddox, was demanding to see me, claiming it was a family emergency. But I had anticipated this. In Sun Tzu's The Art of War, it says to know your enemy. I knew mine. I had already briefed my commanding officer on the situation, flagging both Vera and Dexter as potential security concerns. When Vera arrived at the gate, creating a scene and demanding to see her troubled daughter, she wasn't met with sympathy. She was met by two professional, no-nonsense military police officers. They listened to her frantic story, checked their records, and then politely but firmly informed her that she was not permitted on base and was to leave the premises immediately. For the first time in her life, Vera's power, her tears, her carefully crafted facade of a concerned mother, had slammed into a wall it could not penetrate. The authority of the United States Army was absolute. Her performance had failed. With Vera's tactics neutralized and her primary ally, Nico, now a rogue agent, Dexter fell back on the only weapon he'd ever known: brute force intimidation. A voicemail appeared on my phone late that night. I didn't have to guess who it was from. The slurred, menacing words filled the silence of my apartment, thick with the smell of cheap whiskey and impotent rage. "You think you're so smart, huh?" he growled. "You think you can just blow everything up? You're gonna regret this, you little bitch. I'll find you. You can't hide on that base forever." I didn't feel a shred of fear. All I felt was a cold sense of satisfaction. He had just handed me more ammunition. I saved the audio file, labeled it Exhibit D, voicemail threat, and emailed it directly to Malcolm Rios. Dexter's threat was now an official piece of evidence. After that first, explosive phone call, Nico went completely dark. He didn't call me back. According to Jules's source, he wasn't answering Vera's calls either. His silence became a heavy tactical pressure on everyone, a question mark hanging over the battlefield. In the middle of that tense quiet, the mailman delivered a certified letter. It required my signature. My stomach tightened as I signed for the stiff, official-looking envelope. I knew what it was before I even opened it. The document inside was from the Cumberland County Courthouse. Vera and Dexter Maddox were suing me for defamation of character and emotional distress. They had made their move. They had formalized the conflict. I picked up the phone and called my commanding officer. "Malcolm, it's Alyssa. I've been served." I could almost hear the wolf's smile on the other end of the line. His voice was perfectly calm. "Good," he said. "They just walked right into our trap." On the day of the hearing, I put on my Class A uniform, the Army Greens. It wasn't just clothing, it was armor. It was a tangible reminder of the oath I had taken, a commitment not just to a flag, but to the principles of truth and justice it represented. As I walked into the Cumberland County Courthouse, I left the identity of a broken daughter behind. I was Sergeant Alyssa Holder, United States Army, reporting for duty. Inside, the scene was set. Jules was a silent, solid presence in the front row, my anchor. Malcolm sat beside me at the defendant's table, his focus as sharp and steady as a wolf's. Across the room, Vera was already in character, dressed in a conservative navy blue dress, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, while Dexter sat beside her, sullen and uncomfortable in a suit that was too tight. Their lawyer began, weaving a tale of a loving, heartbroken family, tragically torn apart by a daughter's inexplicable hostility after her military service. Then, he called his star witness to the stand. From the witness box, Vera spun a masterful tragedy. Her performance was worthy of an Oscar. I watched as she painted a portrait of a heartbroken mother, her voice trembling as she spoke of a beloved daughter who had been so sweet before the Army changed her. She recast the night of Dexter's assault as a terrible misunderstanding during a heated family argument, my injuries the result of my own instability. She looked directly at the jury, her eyes shimmering with perfectly produced tears, and whispered about how all she ever wanted was for her family to be whole again. It was a masterful deception. I could feel the atmosphere in the room shift, the seeds of doubt taking root. I saw one woman on the jury give Vera a look of sympathy. Malcolm's hand on my arm was a steadying pressure, a silent command to hold the line. Then it was his turn. Malcolm rose, not with aggression, but with a surgeon's precision. He didn't badger or accuse, he simply presented facts, each one a question that stripped away another layer of her credibility. With each reluctant, tear-choked admission, about telling the pastor I had psychological issues, about emptying the college fund, about placing a hidden camera in my home. The truth bled out from beneath her lies, one clean cut at a time. When it was my turn, Malcolm addressed the judge, requesting I deliver a report rather than take the stand. The judge, a stern-faced man with a military-style haircut and a small American flag pin on his robe, granted the permission. A bailiff rolled a whiteboard to the front of the courtroom. I stood, my back straight, my uniform crisp. I did not look at Vera. My voice was clear and steady, devoid of emotion as I began. Your Honor, members of the jury, this is an after-action report on the hostile engagements conducted by subjects Vera and Dexter Maddox against me, spanning from 2005 to the present. I wasn't a daughter telling a sad story. I was an officer delivering a briefing. I laid out the facts chronologically and clinically, presenting each piece of evidence: the photo from the prom, the bank statements from the embezzled college fund, the Ziploc bag containing the surveillance device. Finally, Malcolm played the audio from Dexter's drunken voicemail. His slurred, hateful words echoed through the courtroom, and I saw Dexter sink lower in his chair. Vera's lawyer leaped to his feet with an objection, proclaiming it all the paranoid interpretation of a troubled individual. But Malcolm was ready. He calmly announced he had one final witness. The name dropped like a bomb in the silent room. The defense calls Nicholas Maddox to the stand. Vera's head snapped towards the back of the courtroom, her face a mask of pale shock. Nico, immaculate in a dark gray suit, walked past her without a glance. He took the stand, was sworn in, and then his eyes found mine. It was the first time he had truly looked at me in years. When Malcolm asked him about the text messages from our father, Nico's voice was strong. He confirmed their authenticity, and then, taking a deep breath, delivered the final, fatal blow. He stated for the record that he had concluded our mother had been lying to him, lying to both of us, his entire life. A strangled gasp escaped Vera's throat. It was the sound of a dam breaking, of a carefully constructed world shattering into a million pieces. She visibly slumped in her chair, the actress suddenly forgetting all her lines. The facade had not just cracked, it had disintegrated. The judge, a veteran who had clearly seen through the performance from the start, delivered the verdict swiftly. He granted a permanent restraining order against Dexter and ordered Vera to pay full restitution for the college fund, with interest and additional damages. But it was his final words, directed at Vera, that brought the war to its true end. He looked at her, his eyes like steel, and spoke of a clear, systematic pattern of profound psychological abuse. He called her campaign of emotional warfare against her own daughter, a non-commissioned officer, one of the most despicable acts he had ever seen in his courtroom. Despicable. That one word, spoken under the authority of the law, was the vindication. It was the public, undeniable acknowledgement of the truth. The gavel came down. Mission complete. There are no victory parades for the wars fought in courtrooms and living rooms. After the judge's gavel fell, there was no surge of triumphant joy, no celebratory cheer. There was only a profound, bone-deep silence in my soul. The adrenaline that had fueled me for months drained away, leaving behind a hollow emptiness. The mission was complete, but the soldier didn't know what to do next. I drove home in a daze and walked into my apartment. My eyes immediately went to the corkboard on the wall. My war room. The web of red yarn, the pinned photos, the printed text messages. It all suddenly looked like the relics of a forgotten war. Artifacts from someone else's life. The objective that had defined my every waking moment was gone. And in its place, there was nothing. Just a quiet, echoing void. I didn't know how long I sat there, staring at the wall, before I heard a key in the lock. Jules let herself in, not saying a word. In her hands was a big cardboard box from Popeyes, the familiar smell of spicy fried chicken filling the silence. She sat on the floor next to my chair, opened the box, and pushed a piece of chicken into my hand. We ate in a comfortable silence that only a true battle buddy can provide. No questions, no "how do you feels." Just the quiet communion of two people, one of whom was simply holding space for the other to exist in the wreckage. Her presence was the anchor I needed in the sudden, overwhelming stillness. It was everything. A few days later, a letter arrived. The handwriting on the envelope was Vera's. For a moment, my heart stuttered. A flicker of some old, childish hope? An apology? I opened it. It wasn't an apology. It was her final salvo in the psychological war. It was a masterpiece of self-pity and blame, a written testament to her victimhood. After all the sacrifices I made for you children, this is how you repay me. One line read. Another said, you have destroyed this family's reputation out of pure spite. It ended with the most classic, manipulative line of all. No matter what you've done, I will always love you. The old Alyssa would have been torn apart by those words, but as I read them now, I felt nothing. Not anger, not pain. Just a distant, clinical pity for a woman so trapped in her own lies that she couldn't see the truth, even when a judge spelled it out for her. I folded the letter, slid it into the manila folder with the rest of the evidence, and on the tab I wrote, Final Enemy Comms. Then Nico called. He asked to meet, his voice quiet and tired. We met at Rowan Park, sitting on a bench overlooking a playground where kids were laughing, oblivious. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. I was blind, he said, not looking at me. I lived in the world Mom built, and I never wanted to look outside the walls. It was easier that way. He paused, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet-covered box. He handed it to me. Inside, nestled on the worn fabric, was our father's old watch, the one from the shoebox Vera had thrown away all those years ago. It was still broken. I found it at a pawn shop downtown, he said. Took me a while. I'm sorry, Alyssa. Not for her. For me. For not seeing. You deserve to have this. It was an awkward, clumsy, and profoundly sincere moment. It was the first honest thing that had passed between us in over a decade. I took the box. I don't hate you, Nico, I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. But I need time. He just nodded, accepting my terms. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a reunion. It was an armistice, a first step on a long, uncertain road. That night, I knew what my final mission in this war had to be. I stood before the corkboard. Slowly, methodically, I began to decommission my war room. I pulled out each pushpin, the tiny pop of the metal leaving a small hole in the cork. I took down the photos, the notes, the hateful text messages. I unstrung the red yarn that had mapped out my pain. I put everything back into the manila folder. The email from Captain Thomason, the photo of the ruined prom dress, the bank statements, the letter from Vera. I placed the little velvet box with my father's watch on top. I closed the folder and slid it into a sturdy cardboard file box. I looked at it one last time. This box was the complete official record of my war. Then I closed the lid, secured it with a small padlock I'd bought, and carried it to the back of my closet. I pushed it deep into the corner, behind my winter coats and old boots. It was a burial. Not an act of forgetting, but an act of containment. I was putting the past where it belonged, acknowledging its weight but refusing to let it haunt my present any longer. The war was over. The enemy had been defeated. The territory had been secured. And for the first time in a very long time, I had a new mission: to figure out what peace felt like. Peace is not a destination you arrive at. It's a territory you have to clear, fortify, and patrol every single day. The months after the trial were quiet. The silence left by the absence of war was deafening at first, but slowly I began to fill it, not with noise, but with purpose. 6 months after the verdict, I was still Sergeant Holder. My duties on base were the same, my uniform was the same, but my mission had expanded. With a portion of the restitution funds Vera had been ordered to pay, I started a new operation, one that wasn't sanctioned by the Army, but was commanded by my conscience. I called it the Home Front Battle. It was just an informal support group, a weekly meeting for service members and veterans in the Fayetteville area who were fighting their own wars, not overseas, but within their own families. Our first meeting was in a small, stuffy community room at the local VFW hall, smelling of stale coffee and old wood. There were only 3 other people there besides me and Jules. For the first hour, no one spoke. Then, one by one, they shared stories they had never told another living soul. As the weeks went by, more soldiers found their way to us. One evening, a young private, barely 20 years old, spoke for the first time. She sat hunched in her chair, her hands trembling as she described a mother who controlled every penny of her paycheck, who called her a dozen times a day on duty, who constantly told her she would be nothing without her. Listening to her, I saw a ghost. I saw myself at her age, drowning in the same sea of doubt and manipulation. The old me, the soldier, wanted to give her a battle plan, a list of strategic objectives. But the me that sat in that circle, the survivor, knew she didn't need a commander. She needed a witness. When she finished, her voice choked with tears, I looked at her. "I believe you," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "You are not alone." 3 simple words. The 3 words I desperately needed to hear my entire life. I saw the tension in her shoulders release just a fraction. It was in that moment I understood. Validating her pain was another way of validating my own. Healing wasn't a solo mission, it was a joint operation. We were all each other's reinforcements. I carried a single keepsake of my father's with me always. It was a simple silver chain with a small worn St. Michael medallion, the patron saint of soldiers. It was one of the few things Vera had never found to throw away. After the meeting, I found the young private by the coffee machine. "My father was a soldier," I told her, my voice low. "He would have wanted another soldier to have this." I unclasped the chain from my own neck and fastened it around hers. "Let this be a reminder," I said, meeting her wide, tear-filled eyes. "You are stronger than you think. You have a whole platoon standing behind you now." It wasn't just a necklace, it was the passing of a legacy, of resilience, of survival. It was a field promotion from victim to warrior. The story ends not in a courtroom or a war room, but on a quiet Sunday afternoon. I was sitting on a park bench, watching families fly kites and push their children on the swings. The sight no longer filled me with bitterness. It just was. A snapshot of a life I had never known, and that was okay. I took out a small, simple notebook, the kind you can buy at any PX. For months, I'd been writing in it. Not a log of crimes or a list of grievances, but just thoughts. I opened to a clean page. The sun was warm on my face. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves in the oak trees above. I wrote down the last entry for this story. I never got an apology, but I got the truth. And the truth, it turned out, was its own form of absolution. I tore the page carefully from the notebook. Slowly, deliberately, I began to fold it. I made crisp, precise creases, turning the paper into the shape of a crane, the symbol of peace. I sat it on the edge of the park bench. For a moment, it stood there, a fragile monument to a war that was finally over. Then the wind picked it up and carried it away, soaring over the green grass. I watched it go, and I smiled. I didn't need anyone else's forgiveness to be free. I had found my own peace. I had written it myself. Thank you for walking with me through every step of this battle. My story has found its peace, but I know there are countless others still being written. The most important lesson I've learned is that no soldier has to fight alone. If this story resonated with you or gave you a glimmer of hope, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Let's build a community, a platoon, where every story is heard and every soldier is believed. Your support helps create a safe harbor for others. Thank you for being my reinforcement.